Hi everyone, so we're going to take a look at bubble 13, 14, and 15 with this video. So we're starting at 13 and we're displaying sensor readings in color. In the early prediction level, you saw how set scale method can convert the full range of sensor readings from 0 to 1023 into a range that can be used for RGB, which is red, green, and blue values between 0 and 255. Let's build on that idea to make an app that can communicate the current value of all three analog sensors with a single color. So basically, it's going to take our light and sound sensors, as well as our temp, and we're going to try to put it in some type of scale. And at least for this point, we are not actually going to have a color yet. We're going to do that in the next bubbles, but we just want to make sure it's reading the sensors correctly. So we are going to set the scale. So I'm going to go to my circuit here, and we are going to, according to our directions, to start, we just need to set the sensors correctly. So we're using the sensor set scale. So I'm going to scroll down and find sensor set scale. And they want us to do this between the RGB channel or the colors. And so again, up here it says RGB, red, green, blue values are between 0 and 255. So I have a sound sensor. I'm going to do between 0 and 255. And then we also want to do light sensor. So I have sound sensor, and I'm going to find light sensor set scale. And that's going to be between 0 and 255. Perfect. I'm going to create some variables as well. So you don't necessarily have to do this, but I'm going to. It's good practice. So I'm going to create a variable. Oops, let me get rid of that variable. Let me grab it. So I'm just going to create a variable for these. So R is going to be, actually, let's call it L for light. And I'm going to do the light sensor value. So I'm going to go here. So I do need the value for the light sensor. I'm going to call it L. I'm going to create another variable for the sound sensor. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to call that S for sound. And I'm going to find sound sensor value. Because remember, it's got to create a value for it. And then I'm going to create another variable for the temperature. And the temperature is a little bit different. It doesn't really have a scale, and it doesn't really have a value per se. It just automatically has that numeric value. So I'm going to go back to circuit, and I'm going to find the temperature, and I'm going to do Celsius. So you notice temp sensor doesn't have the set value, the dot value. It just automatically has Fahrenheit or Celsius. I'm going to do Fahrenheit. And I'm going to make that variable T for temperature. Perfect. Now I'm going to output it in my console log, and I believe that's what they ask us to do. So let's create a variable, which I just did for each of the three colors or the three items that we're going to do. Sorry, they want us to do three colors for each sensor. So I misspoke. My variable should be R for red, and that could be the light sensor. It's going to be G for sound, and B for temperature. So I'm sorry, it should be RGB, because according to this, they want us to create a variable for each of the three colors, such as red, green, and blue, and assign them to the different sensors. My fault, I just wasn't reading. Then we're going to use the console log. So let me find, the console log. And I'm going to output. So I'm going to put the variable, and I got to get rid of message, and I'm just going to do R. And I'm going to do 1, 4. Get rid of that. G for green and one for blue. All right, so let's run this. So again, order matters. You need to scale, set the scale of the sensors before checking its value. So we need to have the scale first. So please make sure you have that. And remember that the temperature sensor can only can read in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. Either way should be ready to give you the values. Perfect. So we're gonna run. And you'll notice now we have the values. So light sensor 7, sound sensor is 129, and the temperature is 80.6. So it looks like it's at least detecting the values for all my light, my sound, and my temperature. So now we're going to move on to bubble 14. And in bubble 14, it wants us to now actually add the color to that. So we have this, and we're gonna hopefully now that our sensor data is scaled and it works with red, green, blue, or RGB, we can go about setting the screen color. So hopefully we can do that. We're gonna add a set property. So I'm gonna get rid of this console stuff. So I don't really, well, we can keep it just so you can see. I'm gonna set the property. So I'm setting the property. And set it to change the screen's background. So I have to remember this is screen 1. So I got to set the ID to screen 1. And then they want us to change the background. So instead of width, it's going to be background. And now I want RGB. So let's see if that actually is oh, look at that, RGB. And instead of, oh, I probably should have not done that. I probably should grab this one instead. Sorry, guys. I'm actually going to grab the RGB yellow box and drag it to that third box there. And I'm going to set my 3 variables, and I'm going to make this smaller. So that RGB had actually 4, but we're going to make it 3. So there's a little arrow right here that can condense. So RGB, I'm going to set my value. Again, I name my variable R for the light sensor value. So remember when we did the console log, it actually is a value. So I'm just calling upon the variable R. The second one, I'm calling upon the variable G, which is the value of the sound. And I am calling for the third blue, I'm calling upon the variable B, which is the value of the temperature. So let's run this. And you'll notice that it changes the screen to apparently green. That's the color of all the sensors. The combination of the number 7, 130, and 80.6 makes the color green. Yours might be different because your light might be different in your room. If I reset and maybe I put my hand over it, let's see if that changes. I'm putting my hand over the light sensor. Oh, it didn't really change. Oh, 3 is low, but it's still pretty close to 7. So, oops, sorry guys. Go back to bubble 14 here. So I think what I would probably do, let's run this and look at here. 3, 126, and 84. So I really have to be big drastic changes between sound and light and temperature. So maybe if I held it to really hot, maybe by the overhead a little bit, you guys could see, or you could really change those numbers significantly to make the numbers or to make the color change in terms of from green to something on a different scale of red, green, blue combination. All right, so let's move to bubble 15. Let's hit finish. And in bubble 15, looks like we're going to talk about seeing if it can continually update. So it's thinking here. So this sensor to color app isn't super useful if it only sets the color once. So just like in I just showed you in bubble 14. Once it turned green, that's it. It's not changing anything. You can now use the sensor data to make the app continually update as like maybe the temperature changes or the light changes. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we want to do is we want to move our set property block to an event handler. And for one of the sensors to make the app continually update. Okay, so we keep the sound sensors. Again, we're going to move the set property block into an event handler for one of the sensors to make the app continually update. So let's get a event handler. We're going to go circuit. I'm going to use my onboard here. And I'm just going to drag it. Let's drag it here. Or we can drag it below for right now. And then let's talk about it. So they want us to pick one of the sensors. So I'm going to pick light. I'm going to pick the light sensor. And I'm going to say that now I'm going to take all those things. So I created an event handler for one of the sensors. You can pick, I picked light, you could pick sound, but I'm going to pick light. And I'm going to say that it's taking in data. So obviously, depending on how bright it is in the area that I'm in. So it's going to bring in data. And now I'm going to take my variables and put the set property in. So I'm going to grab my variables here. I'm going to drag them inside my on event. Oops, sorry. I got a little weird with my dragging of variables. I'm just putting them all inside my on event. And I can get rid of these logs. It's up to you if you want to keep them. You don't necessarily have to have the logs. I just kind of like to see what the numbers are and not just rely on the color. All right. And then I'm going to take my set property and also put that inside of the onboard event, exactly what it says. So that set property is now into the event handler. So we're good. And it's in for the light sensor. So I just took one of the sensors, again, the light sensor, and now hopefully it continuously changes depending on the light. So let's see. Okay, so it's green. See how if you look at the console part, it's constantly changing. So depending on how much light it has, it's not, I don't have a lot of light in here, so you notice it's not changing, but it is reading. It goes from 7 to 9 to 10. And then it goes back to 0 or 2 because I have my hand over my circuit board. So even though the color is not changing drastically because I don't have a lot of things going on, it possibly could. It's not doing too terrible much things. So if I hit reset, maybe instead of the light sensor, let's change it to maybe the sound. Okay, and run. Ba, ba, ba. Ooh, it changed a little bit, so I gotta find the sound. Boop! Ba, 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 ba. Ba! Boo! Da, da, da. Boo! Boo! There, so you notice that as the sound sensor is a little bit more dramatic, and you can see the numbers are constantly changing based on the reading that it's getting. And that is bubble 15. Once you're done, awesome. And I will talk to you guys more about what's next in lesson 8.